when you open this door labeled gender as a social construct, what that means is that woman is a role. And if a woman is a role, if it's something you do rather than something that you are, then anyone can become a woman by doing woman stuff.
He's a science fiction author, a frequent guest on the show, and we love hearing from him. Devon Eriksen, the author of Theft of Fire, which you can find on many fine bookstores, and the audio version at devoneriksen.com. Good morning, Devon. Welcome to the Wake Up America show.
Well, good morning.
So maybe just comment on that, the fact that in the UK that telling the truth might get you clapped in irons.
Well, this has been happening for some time over a lot of things. When you start arresting people over expressing sociopolitical opinions, it all pretty much goes downhill from there. So, in my opinion, the United Kingdom is just entirely fake and gay now.
This conversation is more than just about two women involved in a minor spat. This is a civilizational level discussion. Very few works of art like Harry Potter have achieved the kind of cultural cachet that J.K. Rowling has achieved with her great work of art. She feels betrayed by Emma Watson, who stabbed her in the back at the height of the woke frenzy. Now that the woke frenzy is starting to recede and we're seeing all the little planktons and sea stars and things left on the beach, most people who are normal, right-thinking, regular, average people look at what the woke movement is, and they rightly are disgusted by what they see out of the ocean of muck that the left has foisted on our cultures. So talk to us, dig into this, give us your broad view. What role do you think that this conflict between Rowling and Watson plays for the broader discussion in our civilizations?
Well, we can get bogged down in watching the drama on Twitter. But if we sort of take a step back and think about what systemically is really going on here, then what we take away from this is that certain people don't really have opinions, because whenever they open their mouths, what they are actually doing is trying to align themselves with the existing power structure. So, Emma Watson is a very typical example. A lot more common with women than men, although it happens with both, is that when she opens her mouth, she's not saying, I think this, I think that. She doesn't have any thought. She's an actress. She is a professional hand puppet whose entire job is to get paid a lot of money for having someone else shove their hand up her ass and move her mouth. That's her job. So did you really expect her to have her own takes? Of course not. What she's actually saying is, I align with the existing power structure. Please don't hurt me or put me out of a job. And now she's saying, I'm going to align with all the power structures because I don't know which one will win.
Now, Rowling has called Watson ignorant. In a way, she's sort of echoing the old Department of youngest and then the oldest Department of Defense Secretary, Donald Rumsfeld, who talked about known knowns and unknown knowns and unknown unknowns, because what Rowling accused Watson of being ignorant of how ignorant she is, in that Watson, when J.K. Rowling was 14 years old, she lived in poverty. When she was writing the book that made Emma famous, she lived in poverty. Emma Watson doesn't understand, and I think this is kind of the crux of this situation, is that people like Emma Watson will never have to go to a public bathhouse, a public pool, have to worry about having anything other than a security guard standing outside a toilet if she happens to use one, while the rest of the women in her civilization have to struggle and have to suffer the slings and arrows of the outrageous fortunes that the woke left pushes on these women and puts these women in danger. It really is. In my mind, that's the crux of the argument, isn't it?
Well, the point in itself is salient, but I think we need to we need to have a little bit more of a critical, and like I said, Emma Watson has no opinions. So it's like she has this opinion because she's ignorant. No, she doesn't have an opinion at all. She has, what will keep Emma Watson safe and employed when she opens her mouth. So the ignorance doesn't even enter into it. She's just a sort of an electronic repeater box for whatever the people around her are saying. I think that J.K. Rowling gets entirely too much credit for pointing out this one salient thing because, despite the fact that she was living in poverty and had a husband who was beating the shit out of her, so she was definitely exposed to risk, that hasn't impacted her modern thinking as much as her political ideology, because the women of the UK are much more at risk from unrestricted third world thug immigration than Troon. And guess what J.K. Rowling is all in favor of as a good little left-wing liberal. See, it's not that J.K. Rowling isn't sheltered. She can make that argument. It's that cultural indoctrination is overcoming life experience. J.K. Rowling is culturally indoctrinated into feminism, and she passes this off as life experience, but she's also culturally indoctrinated into importing the end of Western civilization, which of course makes women not very safe at all, as we have seen over and over and over again. So
she's only getting
Emma
one
Watson
piece of the puzzle.
is just saying whatever. But J.K. Rowling is parroting an ideology. She has opinions, but they don't bend to evidence.
So, in other words, J.K. Rowling, she only sees one piece of the puzzle because she's still accepting the mass migration into her country, not understanding that also places women in danger.
Yes.
So she's missing it. But because this one incident affects her and is about the central focus of her life, that this is the trend that I'm seeing amongst some of these woke people, is that as soon as that one issue affects them, then they back off of that one issue, but they don't recognize that it's a tree of poisoned roots.
Yeah. Well, J.K. Rowling is actually has opinions and is fairly smart. Sometimes being fairly smart just means you can you're better at talking yourself into silly things. Mm-hmm. And what I've pointed out repeatedly in the past is that she doesn't really understand that even with the Troons, the call is coming from inside the house all along. The transsexual fad, the transsexual craze, the transsexual movement has its roots in the basic history of feminism. Feminism's big push to claim all the perks of the male role was centered around this weaponized idea that gender is a social construct. Gender is a social construct, therefore, anytime a man gets a cookie and we don't, it is oppression. Regardless of what men do and what women do and what their roles are and, what actually works. None of that matters. Gender is a social construct. Therefore, we should get all the cookies that men get. And when you open this door labeled gender is a social construct, what that means is that woman is a role. And if a woman is a role, if it's something you do rather than something that you are, then anyone can become a woman by doing woman stuff. So, and as feminism creates this sort of, women get all the cookies paradigm and is constantly culturally dominant, where it's saying to little boys, men are terrible, men are responsible for everything that's bad about the world, you are inherently evil because you are a 6-year-old boy, then it's not surprising that some of them are going to say, well, I'm failing as a man, I want to be a woman. And this places me higher in the demographic hierarchy that leftism has created. And anytime an actual woman objects to this because it has negative fallout on women, that he just says gender is a social construct. And this is something that feminism has already established as an unquestionable truth. Therefore, it's an unimpeachable weapon against people who want to pump the brakes.
Devon, I'm not sure how familiar you are with Harry Potter, the storyline itself, but have you met? I should have asked you before the interview, but did you happen to read her books, the books, or watch the movies?
Well, when I was practicing to become an author myself, I did read some of the material. I didn't go through the whole 7 volumes because I'm not really into young adult stories about wizard schools. That's not my thing. But I looked at it for the mechanical writing quality. And, if you open up a random page in the Harry Potter saga, it's very easy to see that this woman is an excellent writer. You look at it, okay, here's the characters, here's what they want, here's why the action is happening because of what they want. And all of this is understandable from a single page that you open randomly in the middle. So she definitely knows how stories are put together. But of course, when you get good at telling stories, you can often be very vulnerable to convincing yourself with the stories you tell.
Well, what's fascinating about it, and the reason why I asked, is that for those who know the stories, in a way, there's an irony. She's being consumed by the same monsters that she created in her book series. One of the characters, for example, is this Dolores Umbridge, who is an extreme feminist, school marm, taskmaster, who enforces what I would say what's happening to her, the people who are enforcing wokeism on her. All of the villains that she created, in many ways, she's being consumed by. There's this irony that's happening right now. And there's something of, I don't know, there's almost a Shakespearean level of greatness that's occurring with this discussion between Emma Watson and... Are you
familiar with the Jewish legend of the golem?
Yes.
This makes me think of the golem, where the Jews of Prague are so afraid of the Christians that they create this ultimate weapon and they set it loose in the streets and it turns on. And, the lesson here is don't set a mad dog loose in the streets in the hopes that it will bite your enemy. Instead, you have to have control over what you're doing. And I think feminists set out to restructure all of society. And a lot of the time, what we're seeing now is all the effects downstream of that. And they are some of them are starting to sound very much like conservatives. Oh, look at the negative second and third order effects of what you are doing. Well, that argument didn't work on them 20, 30, 40 years ago. So sometimes people have to get burned to wise up. And sometimes they don't wise up even when they do get burned because they're unable to make that causal connection between their ideology and what happens to them, even when their karma runs over their dogma.
From a positive perspective on this, just to kind of finish this with a strong, upbeat note, I think that Emma Watson beginning to straddle both sides, to straddle the fence on this issue, I think it shows that our side is starting to win the debate on this one, that wokeness is actually in retreat. And I argue that some of the political violence that we see against Charlie Kirk and others is rooted in the insecurity that the left feels because they're losing the debate.
Desperation. It's because Emma Watson has no opinions of her own, because she is a weather vane. Listening to her with an informed ear kind of tells us which way the wind is blowing. Some years ago, she was very comfortable saying, I'm here in support of every woman but one, clearly indicating the very woman who had made her wealthy and famous. And Now she doesn't feel safe saying that. Now the weather vane is spinning around, trying to figure out which way the wind is going to blow. And the fact that this has penetrated so far into, the enclave of people who are most sheltered from reality is an indication that things are really falling apart for the left. They created an illusion of consensus, and it was really all they could do to with all this manipulation of social media, with all this manipulation of elections. All they could do was really create the illusion that Western civilization was split down the middle. And now that that control is falling apart, we can see that it's not. It's not split down the middle. The people who are sick of this shit, not necessarily conservatives, but just the people who are sick of this shit, are the majority of Western civilization.
Devon Eriksen joining us live here on the Wake Up America show. He's the author of Theft of Fire, and the audio version is now available. Devon, where can we get the audio version of your excellent book?
Well, it's available for download at devoneriksen.com in about a week.
Excellent.
We're actually just finishing up the last the last few correction notes.
Excellent. DevonEriksen.com. And as you can see, if you're watching the live show right now, his spelling, just like mine, S-E-N, DevonEriksen.com for the audio listeners of our show later. Make sure that you guys check him out at DevonEriksen.com. Hey, Devon, anything else on this topic or others that you would like to share with our audience before we let you go today?
Well, I think the important thing when we look at this is not to get too bogged down in the details. Oh, J.K. Rowling said this, Emma Watson said that. It's what is happening in the general discourse that allows this to happen. And I think the major point here is that the wind is shifting.
Agreed. Devon Eriksen at DevonEriksen.com. He is the author of Theft of Fire. Get it at Amazon.com and check out his website so you can get the audio version next week. Devon, thank you so much for your generosity of being with your time. And thank you very much to Christine for setting it up.
It's always a pleasure.
Have a wonderful day.